welcome back everyone for sprint number 2, jumping into our next really big topic for the year. We're going to let Ben kick this one off and sort of give us a reset of where we are, and then we'll jump into our content for today.
Sure, and as always, please feel free to jump in the chat, ask questions. We don't have a huge group today, so come off mute if you feel it's appropriate. So today we're going to jump into an Academy refresher real quick, and then we're going to get into the 100-student protocol, sort of unpacking what we heard. And then we're going to dive into performance assessment and why we think that it should come first when we're looking at implementing deeper learning. Talk a little bit about the assessment basics, performance assessment basics, and then performance assessments as structure. And I have to say, I'm a huge fan of performance assessments. And I think hopefully you will be too by the end of today. All right, so let's just chat. Let's bring everybody up to speed on sort of where we're going with the broader Academy, and sort of people, are always curious, like, what am I going to be asked to do? What are we doing? What is the thing we're creating for the last day? All right, so I want to really communicate that we're talking about small steps. All right, we don't want massive, it's not that we don't want, we're not expecting massive redesigns and something that's humongous. We want something that's small, something that's perhaps scalable, a test. You want to see how things are, you want to try a new tool, etc. So think small steps. Everything that I talk about now, think small steps and iterative steps, towards a big result. All right, so if we revisit the outcomes real quick, our outcomes that we listed at the beginning were that you would have a better understanding of the structural intersections of the key elements of deeper learning models, better sense of local student identified opportunities for growth, identify specific levers for change within your school setting, position participants for like a summer strategy development for implementation the following year, and then also identify specific school models that resonate as potential examples. Now, all of these outcomes, obviously, we haven't hit yet, but hopefully you start to see a little bit here what we're sort of working toward, and some of this might make a little bit more sense to you. All right, but all that said, this experience of the Academy is meant to support your work. It's meant to support what you are already doing. All right, we don't want you to go off and do something completely unrelated or parallel to the work that you're already doing, right? We're also interested in creating a community who are supportive of the work we are all doing. So with that said, like, you might just have something you're thinking deeply about, all right? It may be something that you are approaching implementing, but you're not quite sure. So you might share where you're at in your thinking and ask for feedback, all right? So again, we don't want a shiny, perfect, and unattainable goal, right? We want messy, we want real, all right? And we want small, all right? So we're interested in how the content that we cover already and for the rest of the Academy, how does this support your work? How are you taking what we are talking about and changing your practice? How are you developing something with this new knowledge and then trying to implement it, all right? This has to be realistic, achievable, think small, and think max 3 to 6 months out. Like if this is for a fall implementation, that's awesome. Nothing more than that, okay? All right, so on the last day, we're all gonna be sharing. So you might wanna share your thinking on a recent experience and any influence new learning has had. Anything that we've covered has allowed you to reflect on something that has happened recently in a new way. That's amazing. Let's talk about that. We'd also have love for you to share how your thinking has changed and how this might influence a project or work you're currently engaged in, all right? You've maybe taken a new lens or new perspective, a new frame, if you will, to some of the work you're doing. We're interested in that, and we're interested in hearing you talk about that thinking, all right? Also, you might talk about how your thinking has evolved during our time together regarding a project in the future, something you hope to launch in 3 to 6 months, something that maybe we talked about or maybe we shared or someone else shared that has influenced your thinking or influenced how you are designing going forward. All right. And then you might be a call to action. Like, what else can we help you with? And how else might we support you? Like, you can straight up, call us out and ask for support going forward. That's what we're here for. All right. All right. Again, so small steps lead to big results. But like when we get into the support performance assessment piece, small steps are small step. We assess, we see how we're doing, we gather feedback, we adjust, we evolve, and then we iterate, and then we go again. So it's an iterative process. So start small, but build the feedback loops, etc. So we understand what's taking place. Justin. Oh, let me go into this real quick. Sorry. Oh, did you want to add anything on that before I talk about this?
Just that I know that everyone is like, oh no, we have to actually share, and you all are all over the place in different kinds of roles. But I think it is important to share. One of the really useful things is that there are fellow travelers on the journey. My partner, Karen Perry at the center, always likes to use the words fellow travelers. And so, we want to see what fellow travelers are doing, and we really, sort of want to hear where you're at as a team or as a individual. Keeping in mind that when we run academies and we're giving you all this material, thinking that like you might go run similar PDs, we almost always use school teams. And so like a small group of 4 to 5 at a school. And then when we do it that way and we run like a longer session, maybe 6-month session, year-long session, the expectations for what that final product is then are much higher. So we don't have the really super high, make a huge change expectations here. But we want to still repeat the process, get you used to that sort of sharing at the end of an academy, just as practice for your own work as you think about maybe taking similar models forward.
Yeah, very, very good. And also your thinking is actually just as important as the content we cover. So we want to hear what you think, we're not as interested that you know all of the things that we cover, but what you think about and how it affects what you do. And so that's really important to the other people in this cohort as well. And so we really want to get that sharing of ideas and the sharing of knowledge and the sharing of our thinking, going. So we've done this before, and the most successful experiences happen when we are reflective and we think together. So that's a really important piece. So I know some people, it can be hard. We feel a little bit vulnerable, but we're a supportive bunch, and we're here for you. We're going to support you. All right. So academy structure. So we started off with sort of the what of deeper learning. What is deeper learning? And now we're kind of shifting into the how. All right. So to begin with, we talked about the science of learning, right? What is deeper learning? And then now we're going to be talking about the how. So we're talking about assessing deeper learning. And then in sprint 3, the structures and systems for deeper learning. So it's going to get really more like, what are we going to do now that we have this sort of great knowledge base? All right. All right, Justin, you want to take over here?
Yeah, happy to. Let's get you all teed up with our Padlet for the day. You've been playing along so far. You know that we're going to have a Padlet for the day. So over in the chat is our Padlet for today, which has all of our materials that we're going to talk about and cover today, including stuff we won't even get to because, I just like giving more rather than less. And so the link to the deck, as well as in that first category, that first column there, is the previous Padlets, as well as all of the 4 recordings from Sprint 1 are all in there as well. So that first column is just a good reference column for like all the buildup that we've done so far. And we'll just keep building on top of each other and building on top of each other by the time we get to the end. So that is what we will work on today. And Ben just gave us a bit of that Academy refresh and final product. So we are also there. Where we want to start today is in picking up a little bit where we left off last time. So at the end of sprint number 1, the big packaged of sort of inquiry, deeper learning sprint number 1, we left off with like, go talk to someone, go talk to kids, go talk to educators. And we took a week off and we're like, hopefully you'll go talk to someone. Now, in an academy format where you might be leading, like we really would stress this and build some time for that kind of format of really talking to some kids, talking to some educators. Because of our sprints format and moving really fast, like we didn't put really big expectations on you on that front. That said, I want to still run through with you what we would do next with that student data as we lead ourselves then into performance assessment, right? So we're going to get to performance assessment today, but let's tie a bow on the work that we did to wrap up that first big sprint around gathering data and feedback from students. And so you remember we did the 100 student interview protocol. The 100 student interview protocol has been a go-to for us for a long time. I'm going to put a link over in the chat and you can pop it open, because I want to point you to the second page. COL, protocol, sorry, took me a while to spell it. I want to point you to actually page number 4 of this version. Page number 4 of this version then speaks to what we will do with this data when we reconvene. Okay, and that is the kind of thing I want to spend some time with doing right now. What will we do with this data when we reconvene? And so we sort of have a specific process around this, and I want to sort of take you through that. So instead of even popping open the deck right now, I just want to sort of begin to put us into breakouts. Ben, can you tee up 4 different breakout rooms if possible? And
yeah, sure thing. Yep.
So remind you what is happening in this space. We give our academy members, and you in your own PD work and your own work in your own spaces, give them this task of like, go talk to kids, go for real talk to kids. And then we tell them like, here's a set of questions. And we gave you a Google form. And so maybe you used it, maybe you didn't. I don't really know, but I'm going to assume that most of you have had conversations with kids or educators in the fairly recent past and might be able to speak to some of what you think you hear from kids on a regular basis. Now, what we are not going to do is like a big dissertation kind of data analysis tool where we do like coding, and like Ben has been trying to finish up his dissertation right now, and he can tell you all about qualitative data coding. But we're going to do a really simplified, massively simplified version of that to try to begin to make sense of that data. And so with your breakout rooms teed up, I want to put a link. They're over in the Padlet. All of you, and we're just going to randomly put you into breakout rooms. And so in the data sorting Jamboard column, you can see the data sorting Jamboard column. There's breakout room 1, breakout room 2, breakout room 3, breakout room 4. So there are 4 Jamboards that are teed up, 1 each for your breakout rooms. And the conversation I want you to have coming out of gathering student data is around these 4 questions. What student responses or educator responses surprised you? What responses delighted you? What responses concerned you? And what responses do we need to go find out more information about? Okay, so we're just going to sort some of our data and feedback into those 4 categories. If you're not sitting on data right now in front of you, like call to mind some recent statements that you have been hearing from kids about their experience of school, or from educators about their experience from school. Then over on the left-hand side, if you know how to use Jamboard, grab a sticky note, the 4th icon down, and that will allow you to type in that sort of response and then begin to sort. Okay, so we're going to give you about 10 to 15 minutes out in breakout rooms to put down some recent data you've heard from kids that surprised, delighted, concerned, or we need to find out more information about. Okay, questions from all of you before we throw you out into breakout groups to start to talk recently about stuff that you have been hearing from kids. And we're joined by a couple of NextGen team members, Laura Shields and Susan Dougal. And so we will deploy them and introduce them also in just a minute. Questions? You have a sense of like
process. Yeah. Anybody? Does everybody know on the Padlet where to find the Jamboards? Yeah. Thumbs up. Thank you.
All right,
Thank
I'll
you.
pop around the
Very
breakout
good.
rooms and check on everyone, make sure it's all working okay. But begin to have a conversation both about the student data gathering protocol, what you sort of can hear from that, and then really sorting some of things you've been hearing recently, like actually do some putting down and sorting, and then you can sort of talk about that data that sorts in your breakout rooms. And feel free to reintroduce. We took a week off, so feel free to reintroduce each other as you get back in the breakout rooms and just say hello and welcome each other back to sprint number 2.
I got a couple messages from Justin that things were going well. Good discussions.
Indeed. Yeah, sorry. I was out enjoying it too. So like we held them open for a couple of extra minutes. But lovely. Well done, everyone. A lot of you have been recently talking to kids, and so it was pretty easy to fill the Jamboards. I'm going to share screen and just show and talk through this process a little bit, and then I want to open it all back up. Before I do that, and before we turn cameras back off, hold on, is Carmen still here or not? Yeah, Carmen is still here. So I want to give Carmen Coleman, who might hear more from next Tuesday, depending on the crazy hours and the San Diego situation that Ben and I are going to try to unpack. Carmen was one of the NextGen founder director many years back and helped to create this 100 student protocol. And so as Carmen, as I get some data ready to share, do you want to just jump in real fast and introduce it? And Carmen now leads a deeper learning team in the Louisville, Kentucky region of the state of Kentucky. And so some of the folks in here sort of work closely with Carmen, but you'll see her name at the top of this protocol. So I want to bring you back in and let you talk about it, Carmen.
Yeah, yeah, this was definitely a team effort, but I was sharing with the group, their conversation reminded me that one of the things we realized early on, especially with high school kids, was that you needed to make some things happen that they asked for quickly so that they would then begin to trust you and share about more significant things. So for example, when I use this, we use this in the district where I was superintendent, and the first thing they said was the kids were like, well, we just want more bacon bits on the salad bar. And I thought, by gosh, you will have bacon bits on the salad bar tomorrow. And I went and got them. I mean, they asked for fancy coffee. We want some way to have fancy coffee. Like, I mean, we got them a big Keurig. We probably broke a lot of rules. I'm sure I did doing all that. But they quickly realized that, okay, they're serious. Like, they really are going to, they're really listening to us. So it's a great process. In fact, Justin and Ben, I just shared a PDF with you all of some slides that came from the process at an elementary school. You'll be familiar with it, but this file is too big to share as a Google file, which is mind-blowing to me. But anyway, if you want to share it with this group, the process is so important. And something that came up in our group too, one of our someone in there, and I didn't catch his name, but I think he's in Canada, maybe. Or he has on a Canada sweatshirt. That doesn't mean he's there, but I assumed. But he made some really good points that would be good to share about how to go about tackling what you learn. You ought to jump
Mark,
in.
I'm guessing, Mark, she is pointing at you, who is in Cleveland.
Yep.
I don't know if you're in Cleveland.
I mean, I immediately thought Canada because he was wearing a Canada shirt.
Yeah, no, I'm in Canada. I'm in Canada.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm actually I'm from Canada, but currently still coming home from Florida. So there you go. It's confusing.
Okay.
I was just saying, like, you know, some of the student responses really puzzled me. Like, I thought, what do we do with, for example, one of the students said, teachers don't about our personal problems. And I know that you can get social emotional learning and focus on that, but I thought, why don't I go back to the students with some of the responses that they gave, especially the ones that we don't know what to do with, and ask them, what would you do with this? Like, how would you solve this problem? So to not only ask for their responses, but then show that we trust them with how to solve some of the problems that they surface was, I guess, the point that I was making. And then the other thing was that some of their responses, maybe aren't that helpful, and to ask them to, sorry, it's a little bit noisy, ask them to prioritize your list, so that, if you can only deal with 3 things, ask them to give you the top 3 things that you would start dealing with. Sorry about the extra noise.
Okay,
Great.
awesome. Yeah.
So thanks for sharing that, Carmen. I just added it to our Padlet, so it's in the 100 student interviews column, so people can find that Lemon Mills Elementary School.
Lemons Mill.
deck that
That's
you
where my
shared.
own kids went at that particular elementary school when Carmen was doing that. So like that, when Carmen was the very first iteration, very first time we ever tried this in Kentucky, my own kid was a participant in that. And there was some amazing stories. Remember Devin, Carmen? Like,
yes.
Devin
Oh
was
my
probably
gosh.
elected to office at some point. Like Devin, he was so worried about why kids didn't like school. Like he shut down everything else he was doing in his life. He's like, this is the main problem we're going to work on now. And I think Devin was in 3rd grade or 4th grade.
He was, and that was his passion project, remember? And he showed that graph, you all have seen it, that shows the level of engagement and the decline, how from, about 3rd grade on. He was so worried about that. And he presented for Next Gen, remember? He was amazing.
He was. Kids also care. That's one of the crazy things. Kids actually care.
A lot of good chat going on in the chat about sort of, to your point, Carmen, about putting the bacon bits out, and giving them coffee, like showing them that you really do, you're gonna come through. Like you're asking them for real. You're not just asking them because it's the nice thing to do. A lot of people are saying that like there's not a lot of trust between students and adults. And yeah, there's some good points. Like, and I wish I read this. Someone mentioned about like the same feelings on behalf of teachers, and I can't remember the study, and I wish I have to go find it, because it was schools that had a high degree of teacher autonomy had higher degrees of student autonomy. And so it's like you're modeling how to be for your students. So interesting. Good chat.
Okay, so let me just give you a sense of what to do with this. You all have, and you can already see how good the discussion gets, how rapidly. This is exactly where you want a team of educators to be before we start down a deeper learning journey with them. You want them here. You want them in this place where you're recognizing some things. So this is the Jamboard from breakout room 1, and I'm just using this one just to sort of illustrate what a bunch of data begins to look like. And if this wasn't like a crazy morning 8 a.m. coffee sprint, you would take some time with this. So you would actually 45 minutes of really unpacking data, hearing from Mark, hearing from Neely, like some of you actually did this in your schools. Yay. And now we've got to take that seriously, not just do some of the bacon bits, early implementation stuff, but really try to get a sense of what they're saying. And we like this little 4-part articulation because it helps us learn some things quickly. Number 1 is up in the delight category, the blue delight area. The first thing to learn is that kids don't hate everything. There are several things they like about school. They do notice when things are going well, and they appreciate when things are going well. And there's like the kindergartners who love everything. And so like, it's important for everyone, important for educators to know that this is not a process that's exclusively about what's bad. This is also recognizing what is good, where the kids are appreciating you as educators. So as we tab through the different Jamboards, you can see there was a delight thing from each one. And I think that that's really important to the DC team, and students already showing excitement about the design process that the design team is leading from DC Public Schools in the room. Awesome. Awesome to see. And now you have hard data to say, hey, kids are appreciating what we're doing. So that's all important stuff to get out there. The next two categories that we would go to is the surprises and the find out more about. And so that we can this is not necessarily take immediate action, but these are things that we need to think about. Okay, so there are some things that are surprising me around, the kids didn't talk that much about content. They talked much more about environment and relationships and how to learn. This is from breakout room 4. Ooh, that's an interesting. So, content's not the most important thing on their agenda. They're much more into the belonging and relationship side of what's going on. Yay, really, really important data takeaway. And then you have all the things that you need to go find out more information about, because there will always be things in this data set when you do this that one, surprise you, and then secondly, oh, this is giving me insight to something that I've got to go figure out. And sometimes it's an actual thing, like a bullying incident you had no idea about, or sometimes it is something that is completely off of your radar. So just looking at some of these, teacher agency, we just wait for that PD. Many being offered within our teacher agency, lots of stuff here. And you all had those conversations. So I trust that you found important things that you needed to go find out more information about. And then, of course, there is this other column, the other zone, around responses that concern you. And it's the concern one where we're going to start to generate our momentum to do something different, right? So eventually you work your way to that part of the map. And in that area is some takeaways that you can begin to design forward from. And so from group number 1, as we were having our conversation, I think Maisha, I don't know if I got that right. Yeah, good. And started to notice there's a pattern in the data. Would you be willing to shout back out the pattern that you saw? And then I want to use that because we can go somewhere from that.
Sure. What I noticed was that students, there was a theme of students saying they want to learn something new within the schools or in their classrooms.
Yeah, they want something different, right? There's a desire for different that will almost always live in this data. The kids they want to learn something new. That's the response right under that word concern on this particular page. I'm not learning anything new. I wish I could take an art class or something I can explore. And this is from an 8th grader. And we know from our data that 8th grade is when they're sort of most out of love with school, 8th grade, freshman year. And so this is the period where we most need to give them something that they can get excited about. And so that's a great takeaway that a team can begin to design around. So before I start to talk about what we do next and how you take this forward into a design challenge, 100 student interview protocol or the Transcend protocol. Some of you might have used the new Transcend one. Wrap up thoughts?
Yeah, just to sort of let's zoom out just a sec, because we're sort of building on what we talked about before. It's right now we're just getting data, right? We're just getting the information we need to make decisions. And so we're going to be making design decisions, right? So everything has a design, whether it's intentional or not, and oftentimes, something was designed at some point for something, and then it's evolved to what it is now. And oftentimes, schools are very inefficient places because things have just been added on and nothing's actually been taken away. And so what's really interesting, what we're talking about is actually redesigning something for a specific outcome, right? So it's very exciting, but we need really good information to make decisions and those design decisions.
All right, awesome. And I want to, Mark, if you want to speak to that, let me pull up a slide to go with it. In the Padlet, I've also linked up the Transcend approach to this, and Mark used the Transcend one. So speak a little bit to the data report that you all got.
I just found it helpful to have a summary report with all the different categories. And then within that summary, if something came up that was either low or higher, you can open up sort of a sub report that gives you a little more information. So I found it helpful. I also used the Google survey that you provided, which also is helpful, but it doesn't necessarily give you a report to show you where you are on different continuums. So that's what I found helpful about Transcend.
Okay, lovely. And then I want to take us forward. The Transcend has an adult reflection guide that then sort of is a way to move forward from the data. So like once you get the data and you do your analysis around the data, now like how do we begin to make sense of that data as we move forward? That is linked up in the Padlet, so you can go pop open the adult reflection guide from Transcend. It's just a one-pager, and it has a bunch of these little continuums on it that I think is designed to begin to help you anchor your findings directly to deeper learning outcomes. So that's what I think Transcend is trying to do. With us in Kentucky, we've never taken that step of saying like this directly takes you to the deeper learning stuff. There's always been a natural flow to the data, so we haven't had to like make it direct. But it is a potentially good tool, so I want to give you that. Then what you do next, just to tie a bow on everything around this data gathering phase, is you then have a set of tools to follow the data. And you can then structure an entire PD, the rest of a whole year's worth of innovation could actually structure around these tools. For a long time in Kentucky, we have been using design thinking at this step. And so the design thinking for educators, this is all linked up in the Padlet, so don't feel like you're missing anything. The design thinking for educators tool that came out of the K-12 design group from Stanford's D School was a toolkit that we've used for a very long time. That toolkit sort of always followed this pattern of empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test, reflect. If you've been in this world of education innovation for the last decade, you've probably seen this little diagram before. So, and we use that for a really long time. And Dr. John Nash on our team here at the University of Kentucky, he was our translator and guide through this entire phase. And so he put a book out around this, and Carmen can help to contribute. The 100-student interview protocol is one of the things that lives in that book and is part of the package of tools that John has tried to put together. Again, all linked up in chat, so you can go check out the book. But then you would harvest. So from the next step, you would go ideate ideas, right? Like, okay, so we've identified a couple of concerns. Now let's ideate. Tons of ideas about how to address those concerns. And then we would organize our ideation into long shots, but awesome, a rational choice, most likely to delight, or what is our personal team favorite. The point is not to like pick the first idea. The point is to have a lot of ideas and then organize, sort, and refine ideas. That's super traditional design thinking, and that is a set of tools, and all of the toolkits that Dr. Nash helped us build in Kentucky are all linked up in the Padlet. And so you can see like how we would run a group of educators through a design thinking process to get to an endpoint. But for our purposes in this academy, I want us to continue to center on liberatory design. And liberatory design, remember, lives at this intersection of equity and design. So we're still going to keep design thinking in the equation, but we're really going to prioritize equity and sort of liberatory thinking in our mindsets. And so a new awesome tool deck has emerged. In our liberatory design modes, you can see like when we go and we gather all that data, that's the empathy building stage. That then takes us further to define, inquire, right? That's also data gathering. But then that bottom row of imagining, prototyping, trying, and then noticing and reflecting. That's all super traditional design thinking stuff that lives inside of a liberatory design framework. Now, what has emerged just in the last 2 years, and I'm super excited about, is a group of different efforts has coalesced into a single effort. So there was an effort called School Retool. That was a separate effort that is merged together. Stanford's Design Lab has merged together. The National Equity Project has merged some of their liberatory design work together. You can see IDEO and Stanford are still linked up in this particular effort. The Hewlett Foundation has put money behind this particular effort as well. Sort of a new, really deeply built out co-designing schools toolkit. And you can see that this toolkit takes you through a series of steps, very similar steps, but just all now in a much more structured liberatory framework. And so you can see that number 3 is what we just did, right? We spend time with students to better understand their needs. That's what the 100-student interview protocol would have done for you. And then that bottom row of testing your big ideas, gathering feedback, showcasing. All of these things are labeled as equity hacks. Now you may like or dislike the word hack in this equation. That comes from School Retool. That's the word that they always used in their work. So you can, but each one of those things links to an entire toolkit. So just from the Padlet, let me just show you, because I just want you to have this. We don't have time in these sprints to explore every single thing, but under this design thinking, co-designing schools toolkit, you can sign up to get the entire thing in like a 110-page book. So if you want the whole thing in a book, you can do it that way. Or you can go through this co-designing toolkit. This is the co-designing schools toolkit. And then you have a bunch of tools, right? So here at the start hacking phase is each one of these is like a process. This thing opens up a process document. And then you can see like this thing takes 60 minutes. There's an objective, there's materials that you need to have in advance. There is a worksheet that they provide for you to use and to work from. And so this is a really, really well done, deeply built out toolkit that can take an entire school through a liberatory design effort that's relatively new and I absolutely love. And so all of that is over here under other good student data tools and design thinking tools. So you can just click and check out all of these different tools. But it's this co-designing schools toolkit is the one that is sort of most useful. I'll put it up at the top. Okay, so
there was a couple broken, there's a couple broken links under the tools from John Nash, but I fixed them at school. So I think I fixed them. So thanks to Constance for letting me know. Check those links, Constance, and they should work.
Okay, I'm sorry about broken links.
No,
it was
no
like
worries. Yeah.
11 p.m. last night, so I must have messed something up.
Well, maybe I hope I fixed them, we'll see.
And John has a design lab here at UK, a D lab. And so like, if you find his work to be particularly useful, John is like available for partnership and can work with a team to do some of this work. And happy to make those connections if people are interested. Super worth it.
Definitely worth it. I've never had a bad session with him.
No, educators love him. We always get the highest possible feedback. In like Carmen used to have words for like the coolest guy I know or something like that. I forget what we used to mess with John's head with.
He is the coolest guy I know. Remember, he would like put his name tag on it, real crooked, upside down. I mean, he just was able to pull stuff off that, people would look at me like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? And he could just get by with it.
Yeah. I mean, he is a prototypical professor, Stanford designer, like, yeah, that's all the things you have in your head. He's fulfilling lots of those. Okay. Now, generally, before we make a major page turn into performance assessment, do you see like that's where that data thread would go? Once you gather student data, then you can continue that thread into a design thinking process if you wanted to. Okay, that's not necessarily how our academies go. We're going to move next to performance assessment, which is more normal for our academy. But you could take that data phase and just follow that data phase through an entire design thinking effort to get to, this is the innovation that our school team wants to do this year. Is that making sense to everyone? I see the chat is rocking today.
Yeah.
Well done, everyone.
Well, I think the design thinking process is so good because the iterative nature of it, and then the empathy is huge. So you're actually designing for the user. So you're making design decisions, but then you're seeking feedback on those decisions really quickly, and then iterating many times. And so it's fun. People feel included. You make cool stuff.
Yeah. Wow, Angie. I can learn everything I learned in school today in 10 minutes on Google. Now, he's probably not 100% true on that, but there's probably some truth in that. Okay. So let's do something useful, right? In that data, we always find a thread to follow. And those threads that we follow will almost always take us in a useful direction. And we always then go sort of next to performance assessment. Like this is a tried and true pattern that we tend to follow because we all want to do something about these kinds of statements. Like I can learn everything I learned in 10 minutes on Google. Of course, we want to deal with that. But what we want to caution you all, remember, we're going to exercise strategic patience before we just launch off into a whole bunch of projects. That strategic patience part is necessary because what we're going to do in that window of time is we're going to actually build some structure. And performance assessment is the first structure we're going to go build. This is the thing where you've got to have a plan for what assessment looks like before you go launch your teachers off into tons of projects. All right, so big page turn then to performance assessment. Deep breath, here we go into the core content for our next big sprint. Okay, so performance assessment land. This is actually Lemons Mill and hanging out at an exhibition, an old photo of mine. So I want to start this actually with a series of questions. This comes from the Assessment for Learning project, which is, I think, a good place for us to mentally get our heads around a continuum of questions. So let me tee up and put over into the chat. In fact, I want to do this, instead of doing this on the deck, I want to do this on a Jamboard that I just built. So this is the part I was building as everyone was coming into the room. So we'll see if it works. I'm going to put a link over into the chat. Everybody pop it open. And let me stop share, and over in the Jamboard, that link in the chat, everyone just pop into that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to ask ourselves these 4 questions from Assessment for Learning. And I want you to grab a dot on the top, just grab any dot on the top and put it on the continuum to reflect, is assessment in your school context more like the thing on the left or more like the thing on the right? Okay, so we're just going to grab dots and we're going to arrange the dots on the bottom, sort of along the continuum. I hope that that makes sense.
Is it a view only for everybody, or can people?
No, okay, editor. All right, refresh, click the link again. That's what you get for building it literally as in the starting.
No worries. All right, here we go.
But I find this to be a fun little continuum.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
And so let's play with this continuum. Good, people are grabbing things. Okay, great. And so I'll share screen, but we are on number 1, slide number 1 at the top of that Jamboard. And so grab a dot at the top and then sort of speak to, yeah, sorry, let me send that to the back. Whether that on this one, assessment for learning is an integrated process. Is your assessment in your school an isolated event, not really that deeply connected to curriculum, or is it sort of an ongoing process integrated with curriculum and instruction? And we're really falling in the middle as a team on this one. Like it's somewhat connected, but not really deeply connected to the integrated curriculum. Okay, lovely. Everyone's doing awesome with our little circles, and we're grabbing and we're posting. Okay, we'll move up at the top of your Jamboard is you can see 1/4. And so to the next big question. So assessment for learning prioritizes feedback and reflection. So pop to the next slide in that Jamboard, number 2. So is assessment at your school or in your school community, in your district, wherever you're at, wherever you're practicing, is your assessment focused more on the instrument rather than building relationships to enable feedback and reflection? Or, is your assessment more focused on building relationships and through feedback and reflection? And on this one, you can see that we are coming differently on slide number 2. So our assessment is not all that well built for relationships and rich feedback and reflection as a whole. Okay. All right, good to know. Third one, popping over. Now, what about bodies of evidence for learning? Bodies of evidence of learning. So how much is your assessment building a body of evidence? There you go. Thanks for grabbing those. How much is your assessment building a rich, varied evidence of learning versus the main output being sort of just a score? All right, a little more mixed, a little bit more mixed on this one. Yeah. No one is all the way towards generating rich, varied evidence of learning. Does everyone know what we're doing? We're using the 3/4 at the top to move through the slides to grab different Jamboard pages. Okay, let's jump to the last one then. So assessment in your school, is it in terms of how do the strategies fall on this continuum on equity? Are your assessment strategies advancing equity, making equity more readily apparent for kids? Or are your assessments making inequities visible, like so we can see the differences in the scores, but it doesn't really actually help us to reduce the differences in the scores?
So Justin, are you going to talk about the difference? Because we're talking about assessments for learning, right? Not assessments
Yeah, jump in, Ben.
learning. Yeah.
Ben wants to talk about assessment for learning as a really big thing. So do it, go for it.
No, I just think it's something that it changed the way that I thought about the learning process when I started thinking about for learning rather than of learning. And it just became it sort of becomes how you do teaching. And it's one of the reasons I love design thinking and the iterative process, because you're consistently, taking feedback and then using that to develop next steps. And it's the same in the learning process. When you're working with your learners, you're gathering feedback from them, and then that feedback informs what they do next. And when they're part of that process, they have ownership over the direction they're going and what they need to do next. And they may be deciding what it is that they need to do next, but then then they're closer to that outcome. It's not you're gonna do this thing today, and then by the end of the day it's done, and then you move on, and then they forget it. Those crazy stats where they have kids retake tests like 2 months afterward and 6 months afterward, and they score like a 20% or something like that. you know, even the kids who did extremely well. So when you look at like mastery learning and you know, kids moving toward mastery, the assessment for learning just becomes integral into how you do teaching. So, and you know, performance assessments are part of that. It's how we do teaching.
All right, so we're gonna do just a super quick intro to performance assessment to set us up for the next several days of the sprint. All of those series of questions was for the Assessment for Learning project linked up in the Padlet. They have a self-reflection tool, and that's essentially what we just did, was their self-reflection tool to begin to self-reflect on what is going on with assessment in our buildings, and are we doing assessment for learning, as Ben just said, or are we in a place of assessment of learning? And it's like a pain in the butt that we all suffer through, and the kids suffer through, and the teachers suffer through, and everybody just suffers through it. As a parent, I suffer through it. Okay, so that is all there in the Padlet. I want to link back in the first sprint to street data. This is street data. We're going to talk performance assessment is more tightly linked to street data. Remember, we asked a question about the altitude of your data. You know, as you do assessment, what is the altitude of the data that you are gathering about kids? And we can articulate a lot of our assessment tools to different altitudes of data. And we can all say that, like, the big test at the end of the year, that's a 30,000 foot satellite level view of what's going on in a school with a kid. It's not at all street level data. So a lot of what performance assessment is giving you access to street level data on the altitude theme. We don't let pilots fly planes unless they first can show that they can take off, fly, and land a plane. And so, you know, when things really matter, we tend to use performance assessment to determine whether or not a kid or a young adult actually knows something. So in pilot training, this is what it would look like since we use altitude. This is what it looks like when we prepare doctors, right? We're going to test them. Of course, we're going to give them standardized tests. We're going to give doctors plenty of exams, but we're also like, show me that you can do this before we're going to turn you loose onto having your own surgeries. This applies in CTE worlds as well, right? A lot of our agriculture courses at school, a lot of our CTE or career tech courses in schools are heavily embedded with performance assessment. Like, actually show me you can weld, right? Like, why would I judge welding in any other way? Electrical, culinary. And then, of course, the classic one is the driving test. My own kid is taking a driving test. My oldest, Matthew, for those that know Matthew in the room, like Carmen does, Matthew is taking his driving test in about 3 weeks. So we were learning how to parallel park last night in our yard. And I wanted to put the cars and actually let him parallel park between cars, but my wife does not trust him enough yet. So we were going to do a performance assessment with cones first before we actually parked the cars and let him try to parallel park in that. So that's the most classic example. We both give a driving test. Matthew took a driving test in actual form, an exam, but also like put him in a car, drive around. Can you actually drive before we decide to give you this license? So when it actually matters, we tend to use performance assessment. So even that statement alone is a pretty critical reflection on what we do a lot of in schools, right? When we're not using performance assessment, did it actually matter in the first place? I don't know. That's a hard question, and we don't have to understand it all. A lot of these, though, this question does matter. This matters to me a lot. When a kid graduates, and this is where Carmen, having Carmen in the room is fun today as we get into this stuff. Sorry, it's nice just to have you here, Carmen. I mean, we asked a question. Carmen and I asked a question. Carmen asked the question most to her board when she was a superintendent. What does a high school diploma actually mean? Are they ready? And it matters a lot. So how would we actually know? Like, is just giving the standardized test, just giving the bubble sheet, is that enough data for us to have confidence in our answer of giving them a diploma, meaning that they're ready to then tackle the real world? Ultimately, we concluded, of course, it was not enough. We needed a different data source to really know if these kids are ready for the careers that we think that they were going to jump into.
So Justin, real quick, sorry.
Yeah.
One of the things that, just to piggyback on that, Carmen says that I love too, is evidence of learning. So what you're talking about is like, what evidence of learning do we have, right? Rather than just a score, because the score really doesn't tell us all that much. Like
Right,
80% of what?
Yeah, and we have just learned in the last week or so that just that phrase, evidence of learning, has a very different connotation, right? Which is what we want. But I think we are working now to design some content around, like, I think we need to start with what does the word evidence mean? Take it out of, in life, when you need to see evidence of something and really position it there. Like, what evidence do you need that your child is ready to drive? What evidence does the law require? And then to start thinking about what evidence do schools produce, and what do they tell us about learning? What evidence does your school and your district collect? And what does it tell us? And what does it not tell us? That we've just found that term is very different for many. Yeah, just an interesting point as we dive into performance.
Yeah, super interesting. And also too, when you flip it onto the student, and you ask them, how would you like to provide evidence of learning? And then you're looking at different modalities, you're looking at different technologies, you're looking at a whole, array of ways that they can then evidence learning. So you're looking at how ways that they can empower themselves. So a lot of schools that I work with is specifically around technology, and they're leveraging technology, and it blows their mind at how detailed and how deep of an understanding as a teacher they can get where the student is in the learning process, because they're creating such rich evidence, utilizing multimodalities, that the teacher learns much more about where they are in that learning process and can provide them next steps. So I love that term, evidence of learning.
Yeah, I do too. I'm a lawyer, so I've always liked the word evidence. So if the whole education world wants to embrace that word evidence as the sort of driving factor, that would work really well for me. So
that's right. We tried too, and even in JCPS, we were starting to, instead of saying, many use the DeForest 4 questions, right? How will you know they've learned? And we immediately think of assessment. We're going to give a test. We're going to give and I was trying to shift that language. Like, what evidence would you need to show you they had learned? Is a test enough? A paper test, is that enough? Is it enough to give a driver's license on? It's not. So what, it's just really a different, something new for many to grasp, I think.
okay, we got just a few minutes left, and I want to tee us up. So today we're just going to get the big topic down, and then over the next series of 3 days, we're going to explore different forms of performance assessment. There's one really important thing that lives at the heart of performance assessment, though, that I think we must have in our back pockets as we're going to move forward. This is also not new, by the way. None of this stuff about performance assessment is new. These are all sort of maybe new fancy packaging of different things, and I'll show you some new Envision packaging I really like. But these are old ideas. Doing performance assessment is thousands of years old, right? So none of this is really new stuff. But even in our world of deeper learning, these ideas around performance assessment go back pretty far. This is Grant Wiggins in the 90s talking about authentic assessment. And like we have had a sense of what an authentic assessment would look like for quite some time. It's authentic in the sense that it's real, it's realistic. If you go to the workplace, they don't give you a multiple choice test to see if you're doing your job. They have performance assessments, as they say in business, right? So this is more reflective of assessment that lives in the real world. And so, none of this, I think, is sort of new. I do want to talk about this concept, though, because remember, a lot of the work that we're trying to do in this academy is about equity. This is an important equity component of how we make our schools more equitable. At the heart of performance assessment is a change in control. There's a power shift that lives deep in the heart of performance assessment. Just like call back the pilot, the picture of the pilot with the experienced pilot sitting behind them. The person actually flying the plane was the student, right? Like in that scenario. That's a power dynamic shift that is at play. And I really want us to have this in our back pocket as we move forward through all of the rest of what we do in performance assessment. We ask that question of who is the one that's exercising the proactive control. And mostly we rely on teachers to create assessments. We give those assessments to kids, and then kids turn those assessments back into teachers and they grade them, right? So the control dynamic starts with the teacher, and then it comes to the student, and then it comes back around to the teacher. That's sort of the root of most of the assessment that we do in schools today. In performance assessment, that power dynamic shifts. It flips and turns around a bit, where in this instance, it's the students that are the creators. The students are the ones that are making something, doing something, building something, prototyping something. I don't know, insert action verb here, right? They do something. And then it gets assessed by the teacher. And then the teacher gives feedback to the kids. The kids make changes to the product. But the person in control of the product is the kid, not the teacher. At the very root control basic level of this operation is this subtle shift into who's controlling the performance task, right? Sometimes we'll use the words performance tasks here to talk about what is this thing that they're doing, right? The teacher gives a task, but doesn't give the product. It's the kid's job to go build the product, make it, perform it. I don't, whatever the word is, I don't care. That actual doing lives with the kid. And then the teacher is providing feedback. And so in this way, the teacher really takes on a different role. The teacher feels more like coach in this scenario. Instead of the one that is the sort of person exercising power and control down to the kid, this is more about standing behind the kid, just like in all those images. Like if I went through that list of images again, there's a common theme in those images about where the teacher is positioned to the learner, always at the side, slightly behind, right? That, like, even mental positioning is at the side, slightly behind, because it's the kid that's in control. It's the kid that is doing. And so that power shift is critical to the equity work of what we do with deeper learning. Like, so all the inquiry-based learning, all this stuff we think is really good for equity of opportunity as well. But the core reason why so much of this is good for equity of opportunity is because we've actually shifted control of the doing. Is that resonating and making some sense with you all? Okay, hopefully that is. Now, that might sound scary, and I think to most teachers that does sound scary. Like, whoa, giving control away? Wait a second, no. And so that is a scary proposition to many teachers. And so our job as leaders is to help make all of this way less scary than they think it's going to be. And we have lots of tools at our disposal. We have lots of formats, protocols, all kinds of things that we can bring into the environment to make this less scary, both for the kid who's now being asked to do something for real. And remember, they're playing the game of school, right? So like, wait, I've been playing the game of school. I fill out the bubble sheet. You give me an A. This relationship works. But now you're going to ask them to go build something. Like, you know, you construct your own play and perform a play to demonstrate mastery of, you know, 17th century European history or whatever the heck you happen to be learning at the time. You know, that performance task asks a lot more of the kid. And so that's scary to them. It's scary to the teacher. This whole thing can get pretty scary. But I really, really want to reinforce that our job is to help make all of this less scary. And the team who is the best at this is Envision Schools. And so we're going to sort of follow Envision's general framework, and we've been following it for a long time in Kentucky. And remember, our theory of action is intentional about doing performance assessments before we get to the pedagogies and school structures. So like, there's a reason we do performance assessments next. And then this is sort of like, if you're a person that loves definitions, like here you go. This is a combination of definitions from Justin Wells and Grant Wiggins mashup to define performance assessment in this way. Okay, yeah, grab it, screenshot it. It's all in the deck. You can go do it, whatever you want to do with it. But if you had to define performance assessment, this is what you would use: a product of performance, of application of a targeted skill to do a real thing, students having proactive control of the product or performance, and then of course a learning experience on they can reflect, revise, and grow. And then these performance assessments have clear outcomes. It's also clear how they are going to demonstrate that outcome in terms of what the task is and how we're going to measure how you did. And that means we're going to rely a lot on rubrics. Okay. Love to Envision Learning Partners as we wrap up today. They have a whole bunch of awesome stuff out there. They have a whole model for high quality performance assessment. This is some new stuff out of Envision over the last couple of years. And they then define these 5 specific components of high quality performance assessment. Eliciting evidence that matters. It's tight on its criteria for success, open to different learner approaches, authentic, and a learning experience in and of itself. They then have a bunch of slides that are all linked up, and they're on their website, so I'm not sharing anything I shouldn't be, that really dive more deeply into each one of those criteria. So you can go check all that out. All that's linked up in the Padlet. And let's just stop there. I want to, in fact, stopping on this slide is good because the list of performance assessments is short. One way to make all of this much less scary into your school is to not come to a position of every single thing that we do in this building is going to end in a performance assessment with a public defense, with an authentic audience. Like, that is going to scare the heck out of everybody. And so we have to make choices as leaders. This is a big part of the academy experience and like what we try to teach our leaders in Kentucky. We've got to make choices. We are going to implement performance assessment in our buildings, but we're going to do it in limited ways that speak to specific portrait of graduate skills. And we're going to make choices about when to deploy exhibition nights, what goes to student-led conferencing, what artifacts wind up in a portfolio that might lead to a defense. We're going to make choices to make that tight. And one of the things that always shocked us is at Envision Schools themselves, their list of performance assessments, major performance tasks, equaled 4. That's a really low number relative to the task of high school. And I think that's an important learning in terms of how we deploy and scale deeper learning, is that we must have performance assessments, but we have to be really judicious in when we will employ these performance assessments. All right, Ben, I will stop there. This is the part of the academy though, where like the do something kicks in. And so as we go through the series the next couple of days, like all of this stuff is the great starting spots for deeper learning is to try out a form of performance assessment. And so on Thursday, we'll talk about exhibition nights. They work so well for elementary. So we have a principal of Painted Stone Elementary joining to talk about exhibition nights. James and Susan and Laura in the room are all from Shelby County, Kentucky. And so a Shelby County, Kentucky principal and a few kids are going to join us on Thursday to talk about exhibition night and like how that feels to them. So we'll have all that going on Thursday morning. And then we'll move towards defenses and backpacks and portfolios. I have a school that I'm just so excited to share with you about their backpack performance assessment model that because it's got to be simple, it's got to be digestible. So the simple, most digestible one I've ever seen is from Francis Parker Charter Essential School in Massachusetts. So we'll take a deep dive into that. And then we will work our way towards next Thursday when Susan and Laura, who are in the room with us, Team Next Gen, Susan and Laura, yay, are going to share how this then begins to build the performance assessments begin to add up into a competency-based assessment model. Okay, so that's our flow in the next couple of days. Okay, I know it feels like hard work, but remember we're sprinting people.
And I think what we didn't mention earlier, we have like no minutes left, but Justin and I are gonna, as we move forward, maybe provide some opportunities for those teams who are, or individuals who are like getting into doing something and they want to sort of a one-on-one or, you know, just 30-minute chat talking through something, you know, bounce ideas off somebody. We'll make ourselves available if and when we can, because we'd love to find out more about what you're doing. And sometimes it just, you know, it takes that talking through something just to unlock something new. So we'll talk more about that. Not next time, but next Tuesday.
And for those that are going to San Diego, Ben, you should definitely find a local establishment of enjoyment and have a moment to everyone to say hi, since you all are going to be in a physical place together.
For sure.
Which might make up, because since several folks are not going to necessarily be here for next week, like that would be a good sort of replacement
touch
thing.
base. Yeah, for sure.
And not like you all have to do a sprint out there together, but just like okay, team, we will launch off into our performance assessment sprint, pick it back up on Thursday. We'll have kids joining a principal who is actually doing this work, and we'll get into exhibitions of learning.
Well done, team. Great work today.